When I look at our history, I realize that our history is not negotiable. It's not defined by slavery. It is a profound history, and we need to teach it in honesty. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Erudition Network. Hi, I'm Eddie Phillips, the host of the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge session. Today, you are with me here on this Saturday after the 4th for us to spend this next hour or so talking about Black history as we do every week, and to inform and to teach and to provide information that is not commonly either known, or things that you may have learned in school, may have forgotten, or were not taught at all in school, which is sometimes mostly the case as we go and delve into Black history. Tonight, we're going to hit a couple of things. This is going to actually be part one of a two-part, because there's no way that I would be able to cover what I'm going to cover tonight completely. So what I'm going to try to do tonight is try to get through it. But I'm also going to try to be as interactive with you all as possible, which is what is the purpose of this particular program. The Erudition Network Interactive Black History is for you to also provide your opinions, your thoughts, and to get you to type into the comments, and post in this live chat what you think about what we're talking about. Also, if you are joining us on Facebook and you start to type in your responses, I apologize. I don't understand why, but Facebook makes it sometimes hard for us to see your comments. So I like you to, jump on over there to YouTube, and you definitely can put your comments in there, and we will respond, or I will respond to your comments as I see them. I do try while we're on the show to click over to Facebook and to see what it is that you all are talking about, to see if I'm actually missing something. So I will definitely try to do that also. As I said, this is an interactive program, and I want you to learn from this program. I want you to grow from this program. So your input, though it is requested, I'm asking you for it. It's not required. If you just want to join us and just learn, the only thing that I would ask you to do is to share the program so that others can also benefit from it also. So I'm going to cover some things tonight. I titled this program, and I knew that when I was writing the title for it, I knew it would probably anger some people. I get some responses on social media that it kind of angers people. I will give you an example. Yesterday, I posted on Erudition a video that talks about Black patriots who fought in the Revolutionary War, and how they were an important part of our country's birth of freedom, as they call it, or its push towards independence. And so I got people saying, getting on and saying, well, why, there were other people other than Black. And then I told one of the people, I said, well, yeah, but you can't name any of these Black people, because we go really, really deep into the George Washingtons and the Benedict Arnolds and all of these people, the John Adams, Samuel Adams, and Thomas Jefferson, and so forth, that you learn about every year in school as they pull it up, right? But we don't know a lot of the names of the patriots, of the Black patriots, and the people who Black people who helped and fought on either side. And so, whether it be for the crown or whether it be all of them fighting for a freedom that they were denied. And so, after looking at the responses to that very simple post, I said to myself, we got to do something where we kind of reset the book again and start talking about where Black people have interacted with history, even before what we know as the current United States, right? We have to actually start to challenge people, because what we're seeing is folks saying and doing things that are contrary to actual facts. I think that's the best way that I can put it. All right. And so I'm not going to belabor too long, but I wanted you to understand what was the purpose of doing this particular show. If you are joining us tonight, please let me know. Jump in the chat. Just let us know that you're here, your name or whatever, and just put something in the chat on YouTube or even if you try to do it on Facebook, and let us know that you're with us, right? So that we can see who's joining us tonight. But I'm not gonna keep talking on a lot of things. I'm just gonna kind of get into this lesson, because here's the thing. As you will know with Erudition, we constantly try to tell you our story started long before slave ships. Our story started long before what we consider to be American slavery. Before cotton fields, before chains, before Jim Crow, before the civil rights movement. Black history is expansive and goes as far as the very beginning of this world. Tina, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. I'm happy that you're here. You're one of the 5 or 6 that I see on here. Thank you for joining us. And so today, I want to start talking about our story, the real story, the factual story, not anything made up, not anything that just comes off the top of my head. Because Black people, Black culture, African culture didn't just start in America, and it didn't just survive in America. As a matter of fact, as we look at it, we start to realize that the Black culture, or original cultures as we see them, helped to build a lot of things. It influenced the world. Matter of fact, I could probably tell you that it helped to shape a lot of your laws, systems, and everything. And very surprisingly to a lot of people, probably more than you would ever have thought. If you look at the African queens, right, who fought Roman emperors, you get that in my book. If you go get my book, shameless plug, right, 101 questions, to the philosophers who taught the Greeks, who taught Europe, well before the Enlightenment period that we see that inspired the founding of America. If you look at the Moors, right, who sparked the Renaissance in Spain, or if you go so far back and look at the African explorers, the Phoenicians, who sailed in places that we don't talk about way before the age of discovery, then you will understand that my title for tonight's show, right, how Black culture built the modern world, right, and how hidden history from Africa to America, part 1. Just like with my book, I try to give you a part 1 or early world so you can understand it's before and beyond slavery. And so this is not just me teaching you history. I'm trying to give you a reclamation. I'm trying to make you resolve and understand that it's deeper than what you may have been taught in school. It goes deeper. And it's not bigoted, racist. It's not to make you feel bad about your culture, because we all can trace our DNA background to Africa. we have to give receipts to what happened. We have to face the reality, and we have to face the facts. There were things that Africans and Blacks went through that they had to encounter, and the resistance made the world stronger. So I want you to grab, this is something new, get a notepad. I used to tell my guys in the Navy that when you sit down with me, grab a notebook. If you can't get a notebook, say you're driving or you're listening to this on a podcast, that's okay. Go back and rewind, and then remember the names and the information that I give you. Call your family. Tell them that we're on live. Share this program right now, because what we're about to talk about tonight is deep. It's deep. And lately, we've been trying to get deeper and deeper with our programs because we're going through a very troubling time. We're going to tell the truth here tonight. We're going to face the facts. And we're going to do it as a group. And we're going to do it in honesty, without anybody taking offense and feeling bad or thinking that they have some guilt that goes back thousands of years. In order for us to have this reclamation, we have to be factual, honest, and truthful to who we are, what we are, and where we're going. So let's start that tonight. I wanted to put that out to you because I want you to learn. Let me know you're here. It helps me to stay motivated as we go through this. I know you're out there. I know you probably just want to sit there and listen, and that's fine. But just let me know you're here, or drop in for the comments. All right? All right. So let me tell you something. We spend a lot of our time talking about cultures that are European, or dare I say white, right? And that's not a problem. That's still part of history, and that's what history is. But Black history is often tethered simply to slavery, indenturitude, subjugation, colonization. But the true story is a lot more richer than that, and a lot more deeper. And it stretches back to the times of antiquity. It's to the beginning and spanning of continents, the beginning and spanning of language, of knowledge, of travel. Because African rulers who influenced these European powers, that happened, are important to understand. The Black intellectuals who sat in the medieval courts in France and England, we need to understand them. Just as much as we need to understand those who came in the New World and fought for civil rights. And we have to go on this exploration. And we have to shine a light on things that have been overlooked so that we understand that we all play a part. And that this thing of race that we create has created a lie that has deprived us of understanding of our laws, our philosophy, our religion. And if we could do that, we could start to lay the groundwork for why we are where we are at in America, in the world. African kingdoms in the past commanded respect. Long before we start talking about Europe and we start talking about the crowns and the people who sit on those thrones, there were powerful African empires and leaders making their mark. In my book, I talk about Nubia and how Queen Amanirenas of Kush defied the emerging Roman Empire, and how she stood against them between 25 and to 21 BC. But many of us aren't taught this. This woman was a one-eyed warrior, strong, determined, and she led what is believed to be roughly 30,000 to 50,000 Nubian leaders, Nubian soldiers and leaders, against the armies of Emperor Augustus, who you learn about in history. as the one who took power after Caesar, and how she even sacked cities held by Rome in Africa and Egypt. You see, ultimately, Rome, this powerful nation, was forced to bend to a black female leader and make concessions to be able to be in Africa, a place where they had renamed Macedon to, or Kemet, to reflect a Roman name, which is what we now call Africa, from Africanus. But they stood against them. What's this comment I see right here? Let's be clear. FBAs from Africa are not Africans. I'm not going to get into any issue where we can do this later, but I think if you sit here tonight, right, and you listen and you actually want to learn, right, factually, I'm always going to give you where you can go, not because someone told me something, but because it took study to learn. But thank you for joining us. I believe that we have to start with facts. Talking about Queen Amanirenas is important because what it shows us is that African rulers were not passive. They weren't subjective. They weren't detached. And it shows our connection to a grander history. And it makes us to understand that we are the descendants of formidable people. We often talk about Hannibal, Barca, and the Carthaginians, or who are also Phoenicians. And for a long time, they tried to make Hannibal Barca out to be white. They tried to claim him. Hannibal Barca is also important because one of the strongest nations, I keep bringing up Rome as we go into this now, because when we ever talk about ancient civilizations, two we always bring up, Rome and Egypt. We don't talk about with the idea of the African being known as the Ethiopian. We talk about Rome and Egypt as these strong things and how Rome subjugated Egypt. But we don't talk about the Carthaginians. We don't talk, I do, again, in my book, and it's the reason why I included them. We don't talk about these ancient African cultures, which nearly toppled the Roman Republic at its height, or challenged them at their height. It underscores the idea that we have a deeper history when it comes down to commanding respect, knowing who we are. Another thing is African thought, philosophy, and world religion. Africa profoundly, let me say that again for those who didn't hear it in the back, profoundly shaped early religion. Whether you're talking about Judeo-Christian traditions, whether you're talking about Islamic traditions, the prominence of Egypt in the Bible, from Abraham's travel in the Bible, in the books of Exodus, right? It reflects how important ancient Africa was to these early religions. Whether you're reading in the Quran or whether you're reading in the Bible. Africa at that time was always seen as a land of beauty, a land of wisdom, a land of refuge, a land of safety. Greek historians like Herodotus wrote, Tacitus, they wrote about how amazing Africans were. They marveled at the Ethiopians and their beauty, the radiance of their skin. They talked about their customs and their knowledge and their understanding of the world and beyond. Astronomy, science. In the early Christian era, Africa intellectuals were some of the people who led the early church. An African was the one that carried the cross of Christ. One of Christianity's greatest theologians was a North African man of Berber origin. It is not beyond saying how important Africans are to the establishment of religion, philosophy, and understanding. Even the things that were later twisted in Western philosophy originated with thought in Africa. But yet, we are not told this. People spread a new idea of faith that has now minimized the contributions of Africans. But in essence, African minds are the foundational layer of what became the philosophy and religious ideas of Europe. They took a little and made some things of it. I have often told you all how important we are even to the idea of math. We teach so much about math and Western math. We forget that in the 12th century, right? Hugo Salataria, and I'm going to say this again because I want you to understand this. I told you to get a notebook. Hugo Salataria took the math from the Islamic Africans in Spain. He took what they got from the African San, the Barca people, and what they had learned, what the Moors had learned, a little bit, because it was part of their religion. And he took a little small piece of that. I want you to understand the power of that, a small understanding of that. And he took it back to Europe, and it was accepted as alchemy, right? People started to use these things privately. And people started to use it, and it was outlawed by the Roman Church because it went against what they had pushed out as religion at the time. And then they turned it into something else called geomancy in Europe and England. And this is what the kings and people used to come up with how their fates would go and to try to divine what was going to happen and even where to build their castles. Later on, centuries later, a German mathematician named Leibniz became aware of that system, took that math and that understanding, right? And he created a system and added ones and zeros to it. And it gave us the system that we now know as binary. Later on, another white man, a man named George Boole, went further and created what we now know as Boolean algebra. And then another white man named John von Neumann took that Boolean algebra to create a digital understanding for digital computers. And all of our digital computers and phones and everything are built off that little small African understanding. It's deeper than what we think. From that, we come up with all of these different things that Africans understood. I talked to you all months ago about deterministic chaos theory, strange attractors, all of these things that are based out of the knowledge, ancient knowledge. And yet, we're often not taught this. And all of the time, people create things to circumvent the actual factual recognized history. See, here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, that I know and I believe. God will not be mocked. Read whatever book you want to read, go through any knowledge you want. God will not be mocked. The creator of the universe, man, and whatever will not be mocked. That's why there are things even to this day that lay within the earth to let us know factually and internally who and what we are. From going into your mitochondrial data, your DNA, to going and looking at ancient cultures and pyramids and wonders that have stood for thousands upon thousands of years, so that you remember what happened. No, I'm not here to give you theory. The Erudition Network is designed to give you fact. And for you to go and trace those things. Learn who these people are. The lie of these multiple gods, as if the Egyptians or the Africans were always worshiping something as if they were a savage. That's a lie. The very idea of God has African roots. They have African roots. Africans who understood that there was a God or there was a higher being and wanted to find it. The very idea even of the Egyptian sun god comes from the idea of why the Egyptians or the early Africans had to migrate through Africa, and understanding that through interpolation, right, that the sun, the weeble wobble of the earth, had affected Africa, Upper Africa. And so when they went to the Wadi Kubanayas and all of these other places to along water to survive, they understood the power of the sun. And they had to ask themselves, well, who created that? Antiquity shows us that there was a lot of Afro-European exchanges more before the age of discovery that we're not taught about. The kingdom of Exum, or in the areas of Ethiopia, was one of the first states to adopt Christianity. And the European, or who took that from the Ethiopian Christians, maintained ties with them and tried to understand the knowledge that they had that beyond Jerusalem or even Rome. It is important that we understand how the Ethiopian, how the African played into these religions. And they were open, just as the early Africans were open about allowing Greek and Macedonian philosophers or students to come in and learn from places of learning in Africa. Well before the Enlightenment, well before your Oxford universities, well before your European and Western universities. It's so important that we understand. I started on a new book, and then I had to segue into one for kids because it's so important for our kids to understand. But a lot of people come to me and they say, Eddie, well, what can you tell me about the Moors? And I hear so many people in this country talk about the Moors. But let's give some facts about the Moors. Let's talk about Moorish Spain. Because without them, Europe would still be in the Dark Ages. It would have stayed in the Dark Ages. When I was a younger man, people would tell you that Africa was the dark continent and there was nothing of knowledge that came out of Africa. This was the lie. This was the lie that a lot of European and English people were telling, right? Telling folks that nothing of value came out of Africa. This is a lie. And yet, this lie languished for a long time. And unfortunately, there are still people today who accept this lie, who embrace this lie. And I hate to say it, it's some of our own people who do it too. But let me tell you something tonight. That's a lie. That's a lie. You think that it's so amazing or so coincidental that a lot of European, France, England, Germany, a lot of those nations took African relics? Why they came and dug into Egyptian tombs? You think that all of that was coincidental? No. It's because they're constantly looking for something. They're constantly trying to find something. When England had outlawed knowledge, similar to where we're kind of going today, and they lapsed into a dark age where people didn't even have basic understanding of cleanliness and medicine. Black African, Muslims of Northern Africa, and yes, even some Arab African mix in the Berbers, right? Because that's what they always try to say. They weren't African, they were Arab. And they ignore the connection. They came into the continent. And what the Moors did in Iberia, or what you call Spain, right? Over centuries, is they created cities. They created castles. They created knowledge. They opened the door to knowledge in Granada and Seville. And they turned these places into thriving centers of commerce, health, and learning. And at a time when many of the European libraries didn't exist. They didn't exist. They brought in knowledge from Muslim, Jewish, and Christian scholars. The libraries in Cordoba went from having 3 or 4 books, a Bible or whatever, to holding hundreds and thousands of volumes, artifacts that the Moors helped to bring in to European culture. And they helped to not only expand the knowledge, but they brought in things that people didn't understand about ancient Greek and Roman knowledge. And they connected those pieces through translation, through the work of different individuals. They started to understand that people like Aristotle, Hippocrates, Ptolemy, right? That they had borrowed from Africans. That their knowledge came from these ancient African teachers. The Moors helped them to better understand a little bit of math that had been stolen. The algebra and the algorithms and the things that later came out as we call Western mathematics and knowledge clearly came from the astronomy, the medicine, and the philosophy of African people. Ancient texts. And we know this to be a fact because places like Cordoba in the ancient world became beacons of education under Moorish rule. Where numerals and numbers and Persian medicine and ideas and things from the ancient world were brought into Europe and pulled them out of the Dark Ages. Without the Moors, there would be no Renaissance. Without the influence of the Moors, there would be no transmission of knowledge that was later put into places like Oxford and all of these European, then Western knowledge centers. The great historian who wrote, they came from Africa, Ivan von Cernima, In his book, he said, there is no Renaissance without the Moors. There is no Renaissance without African knowledge. It is the reason why during the age of exploration that people like Columbus and others went over to the Americas, because they remembered. There is a map. There were maps and things that were shared that talked about Musa going over to the New World and taking gold in ships and not coming back. There were texts about how Musa went through Africa, giving out gold and changing the economic situation in multiple African kingdoms. And it fueled this idea that pushed the conquistadors and later on, right, all of these people to come over to the Americas seeking gold. I've told you before, when Columbus came, he came looking for gold. He didn't come looking for the new land. And I don't care what people will tell you, because he wrote it in his own words. We have been told and given a lie, but again, God will not be mocked. The Europeans at that time respected the African because they saw the Black kings and they saw the power and the symbols. The influence of Africans in medieval Europe, it wasn't just the ideas. It was in their art. It was in the way that they designed their clothing. It's even in their legend. I don't have to make it up or stroke it up for you. European imagination was captivated by the African. I've told you before, when you go as a child, I didn't understand when you went and read those Greek myths and they're talking about these great kingdoms. They were talking about the Greeks who traveled over the Mediterranean Sea to go to Africa. They were captivated by the richness, by the uniqueness. They were so captivated about the amount of gold possessed in the Mali Empire. Stories of his wealth were put into English stories, put into English art. That by 1375, Spanish cartographers, they depicted maps with Musa sitting on a throne holding gold. That's a fact. These images resonated with people who just before the Moors had lived with basically no knowledge and were dying. It was basically an advertisement about the wealth and prosperity in Africa. And that Africa was a land of amazement and dominance and riches. And explorers and philosophers all went there looking for cities of gold, looking for all of this wealth. And it's in their history, in their heraldry, in their design. You want to look at that? Go look at the coat of arms of European families and towns in the Middle Ages. And what you will find are Moor's head crests. You can still see them today. In Corsica and Sardinia, they're still there. And they were used, right, to show the amazing qualities of the African. But yet we don't know that about our history. We're not learning that about our history. Hey, you guys, if you're here, you got a question, you got a thought, please enter it into the chat. Go to YouTube if we're not seeing it on Facebook, and I guarantee you I will respond to you. The African is so important to world history that when I started and I said I was going to do this show after the events of looking at some of the comments from yesterday, I said, there's no way I can do it in one program. The African, the Black people, and our history that has been pulled and pushed out still resonate in the world today. And though historians will tell you that there wasn't a lot of Africans in Europe, those who were there were significant. They were present, and they were used for their genius, their wealth, and their understanding. And I don't mean as slaves and servants. In the Iberian Peninsula, which we know had the largest amount because of the Moors, Black Africans could be found all over the place doing amazing things. They were craftsmen. They were soldiers. They were nobles. No, they weren't put into slavery. That we have to get beyond the idea of that it all started with slavery. We had scholars, people who brought knowledge, folks who ran universities. Look up Juan Latino and look at what he did in the 16th century in Spain at the University of Granada. We only have to look at the history that is still there, that they can't really hide. They can ignore, but they can't hide. The painters, the artists. In medieval England, we have records that narrate the presence of Black Moors helping the early church in England. But we don't know those stories. If you go look at King Henry VIII and even his father, they had Black people serving in their court, performing, helping, musicians, artists, thinkers. But yet, a lot of times we don't know. If you look at history enough and you go deep enough, not out of rhetoric, not out of regurgitation, go look through the documents that are still there. We are in an information boom. You can look at anything all over the world. You just have to be willing to go through and pick through it. That's what a historian is supposed to do. And then direct you all to where you can go. Because everybody doesn't have the time nor the patience. But we tell ourselves lies or fictions to make ourselves important when the history is enough. It's enough. When Europe entered the Renaissance between the 15th and 17th centuries, people of African descent were still very important in their society. The Medici family that we hear so much about, right? The ones who were installed as the Duke of Florence and helped to push what we know as the Renaissance, right? They understood the qualities of Blacks. Alessandro de Medici was half Moor. And he was the illegitimate son of a Medici nobleman. And though we know that he was named Il Moro because of his darker skin, We're not taught much about him, even though he held great power. Why aren't we taught about that? And he was a part of the Medici family, which we learn so much about, but we leave out parts. Go look him up. Leadership was respected because the knowledge that was associated with the idea of the African was important in those days. We keep telling ourselves that we don't have a full understanding of our history, but it is out there. The Enlightenment thinkers who helped to create the Americas, who also held racist views as Europe changed things with the Essential del Negro and things like that to try to make us or our ancestors to be something that they were not, because they were jealous. People grew jealous of how the African was looked at. And so then when we start getting people like Immanuel Kant, who is a philosopher who is still read today, and how he defined Black people as incapable and not really anything. They knew, but they lied. Immanuel Kant, started to make this lie out, even though during his time, there were still great Africans doing amazing things, educating and growing. Black scholars like Dr. Amo, Anton Wilhelm Amo was a man from West Africa. And he became a respected philosopher in Germany. I'm not going to talk about, brother, you're just indoctrinated. There are no of Africa to America. Here's the reality. You are telling someone a lie, a proven lie. I will challenge you, not here because I'm not going to waste my time, but I will tell you, present me a fact that is both constructive, philosophical, religious based to support the lie that you just told. All life, by DNA, by mitochondrial, we can go deeper, by science, by phonetics, by language. I can go deep with you. Shows that what you just wrote to misconstrue is a lie. It's a lie. But you can accept that lie and you can live in that lie for yourself. But the knowledge is out there for you to find if you stop regurgitating what someone told you and go seek it for yourself. Thank you for joining us. I see so much online of people telling a lie or telling a fallacy based on no fact. Everyone I told you about tonight, even the last one, Anton, you can go look these people up. You can't find or show me a place where someone found that Africans never were in Africa. Whoever told you that, whoever presented that to you, has not picked up a book, has not gone and studied, has not gone and looked at the very ground in Africa. And you take away from our ancestors and the people who laid down their lives and the folks who built kingdoms all across Africa, from the Numidians, the Carthaginians, the Phoenicians, the Egyptians, the Cushites, and you tell a lie to make yourself feel like you're connected to something. It is as crazy as someone who says, I am Spanish because the conquistadors came over and raped the indigenous people. It is within your very DNA. It is within your very DNA, because God will not be mocked. And if you can't give me the science, if you can't give me what was exposed, you're basing your ideas off of things that someone told you. I challenge you to go back about a month or two and go look at how I show you actual research is done. I will tell you, my brother, if you come on here and you ask, I will give you all of everything that I talked about tonight. There will always be a citation or fact. Thank you. Because if I don't need you to join or to be here if you're going to lie and present something that is not truthful. And what you wrote was not truthful. God bless you. We have to, there's no way for me to get through all of it tonight. And that's why I'm doing this program tonight. I'm tired of it, ladies and gentlemen. History is enough. The history is enough. We don't need you creating a lie, talking about something that can't be proven, that is not factual, in order to make yourself feel intellectual. The contribution of Africans to the world, we've already gone through something. It's so immense. There's no way. The knowledge and understanding that was given to Europe during the age of Enlightenment. Go look up a man named Jacobus Caption, an African man who went to Holland, earned a theology degree, and even though he later, like this brother here was saying, got into the idea of self-hate because of the age in which he was living in, it did not change the fact that he showed that Africans were still being allowed and still doing things in colleges and in universities, all the way to the steppes of Russia. And we got people telling us that Africans weren't even in Africa. And not understanding that language, DNA, blood, the things that God has helped us to understand that people did not want unlocked, shows and traces, man, before DNA. Historians and people like my brother here were giving theories, ideas that were laced in rhetoric and some of it race and racism, but never facts. We know within Western culture and even European culture that people were so amazed that they started to abduct the very people from our culture, from African and Black culture, to fit into their designs and to who they were. Nothing more exemplifies that than Hannibal Barca himself. As coming up as a child, you would look at Hannibal, they would have talk about Hannibal having elephants in the Alps, and he was always presented as a white-looking man or an Arab. When in fact, we know that he was Carthaginian and Phoenician. And we know that he was from Africa, but they tried to usurp it. People base things on their bias. That's not going to serve you. That's not going to serve you. I was thinking recently about the great writer Alessandro Dumas, the man who wrote The Three Musketeers, The Count of Monte Cristo, and other stories. And how Dumas talked about how important it was to understand history and understand the Africans' impressions and things and what they brought to history. And for people to assume or to say that there's no linkage, it should be upsetting. I got about 5 minutes before I hit my hour. I'm not going to go too much further. Like I said, this is just part one. And you see that, and it's what I expected, that we're going to have people who come in and give us these things. But I challenge you, be fact-based. Be fact-based. Know what you're talking about. Go deep. Go look at the ancient historians, because that data is there. It's too expensive, too impressionable, too priceless for them to destroy. And there have been people on all sides of religious fervor, be it Christian or Muslim, who have tried. Even so far as in places like Timbuktu. Because it's easier to believe a lie that you could accept and caress and make you feel connected to what you consider to be more powerful than to really know who you are. He's talking about the indigenous. There was a reason why the indigenous Americans over here embraced the African. There's a reason why the Mali kingdom is so important to history. And how traveling back and forth over to the Americas, or looking at the Piraeus map and understanding that the entire coast of America had already been plotted out and put on a map and given to the Portuguese. And there's a reason why the Portuguese, during the age of discovery, after Columbus, and when Columbus was coming back, he stopped in Portugal before he went to Spain. And why the Pope had to later create a dividing line of what the Portuguese could own and what the Spanish could own. There's a reason why men like Estevanico was accepted by indigenous people, and why the African could walk among indigenous tribes without hostility, and why the conquistadors, as we'll get into next week, use Africans to ingratiate themselves to indigenous tribes, because the African that came before, and he didn't come to conquer. He didn't come to conquer. He came as an explorer. He came as the Seattle people told Columbus, and he wrote it in his journals, to show them how to overlay gold on their spears. They came to help. So when you bring up a comment here, bring facts. And if you can't bring facts, I'm going to tell you, well, my brother and my sister, you go on and you do what you're doing. Because eventually what my hope is that we start to know who we are. Next week, we'll talk about the Louisiana Purchase next week and how it was driven by slave rebellion, by the battles in Haiti. We'll talk about Estevanico. We'll go further into the Moors. We'll talk about how all of these things are factual history. And I'm going to challenge you to take what you learned tonight, what I talked about tonight, and go look up these names. Go look up the people that I mentioned. Join us next week. Maybe we may have to break this into 3. And we'll do part 2. I'm going to drop some things probably within our YouTube chat, as I always do, where you can grow your knowledge, where you can go read, and where you can go find out these things and learn for yourself. Knowledge in my head is it's not beneficial if we can't all learn. And we're not talking about indoctrination. We're talking about fact. Facts are stubborn things. And they're all over the world for us to know. Thank you, everybody. It wasn't a lot of talking other than our conscious spirit brother here. But Tina, I thank you for joining us as always. I saw your comment here. Let me address it before I get off. And people can also go back to previous episodes where they will see maps and books supporting each episode. But show them your book. Yes, you can still go online, go to Amazon or Lulu Books and get 101 Black History Question Challenge. This book has over almost 300 something sources. Nothing that we talk about in this book. Rather, we talk about the kingdom of Saba, where we're talking about the Phoenicians, as we talked about the Carthaginians, whether we're talking about the Egyptians, the Elam, on and on and on and on. Even the origin of humanity, talking about the Denisovans, talking about the Neanderthals, talking about the kingdom, the Nok kingdom. All of that is in this book. It is a question book. You can also get this book in a digital version, that works as an answer book that you can display in your home, on your television, or on your computer, or even on your phone, and answer questions in real time and challenge it and make it a game night with your family. Do all of that. Learn. Let's learn. Let's learn. I want you to share the program tonight. If you do nothing else, at the bottom we have our ticker here. You can help the Erudition Network, $sign the Erudition Network. You can always do that. Everything you help us with goes to our website that you see kind of playing over here in the back, which actually shows our books and different things and linkages and everything else here. You can go there, www.eruditionnetwork.com. And you will be able to pull that up. We're going to start trying to upload more episodes of Adroit Living and the interactive onto this page so that people can also do that. Join us on YouTube. We have shorts and everything on YouTube. Please do that. But if you do nothing else, share the program. Share the program. Help us to help others and to grow in our knowledge. I thank you for everybody that joined us tonight, whether you could stay or you were in and or out. Please, please, please share. Let's grow this knowledge. Let's keep growing. Join me next week when we go over part 2. I think I'm gonna have to break this down in 3 because it's so much to cover and so much for us to talk about so that we can stop the lies and the fallacies and grow. All right, I've spoken enough. I've just been going on for about an hour and this gets tiring. All right, everybody, you all be blessed. I hope you had a great 4th. And if you are one of those people who say that you don't want to celebrate the 4th of July, that's fine too. But I ask you to go on to our YouTube page and look at the video that we uploaded yesterday talking about honoring your ancestors who did fight and who sacrificed for a nation that took forever to honor their children and their progeny. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get out of here. You all be blessed, as I said. I thank you again for everything that you guys have brought to the program today. And until next week, you all be blessed. Thank you. Thank you.